Hello everybody, my name is Ratnos, and today we have patch notes for 11.2, including a pretty big one that we're going to start with. There is some raid and dungeon testing. There's actually already been some. Normally I would do that testing and then make videos about it, but this time around it's actually lined up pretty unfortunately for me with being out of town during both the Mythic and Heroic testing, so you'll have to find other sources for PTR raid testing video content this time around. Sorry about that. It'll be back next PTR cycle. Unless it lines up like that again. But we are going to start off with the big news here, which is Monk. This is sort of, so there's a lot of changes that are like, oh, the set bonus, this, a little bit of tuning here or there. This is what I would describe as a big sort of structural change to how one of the classes fits into the ecosystem in WoW. And Monk is Mystic Touch now increases physical damage taken by 8%. Was 5%. Developers notes the amount of classes that deal pure physical damage is quite a bit less than those that can deal magic damage. For this reason, we are making some targeted adjustments to Mystic Touch to better improve its overall effectiveness for physical damage dealers. So this is going to have, I would say, medium to large implications for Mythic Plus metagaming. Already, we've seen some teams playing physical comps around, Battle Shout, a bunch of physical damage dealers, Mystic Touch, and doing big damage that is all physical and all scaled by attack power, rather than the sort of traditional M plus comps that, if they have raid buffs, are the more catch-all ones, or the Chaos brand that improves magic damage, which, as the developer note states, almost everybody does do chaos or does do some kind of magic damage. This is going to be interesting though, because this is now a sizable damage increase, right? A sort of a 3% increase in damage for that composition in M+. It's not something to sniff at for high-level M+. For kind of average case M+, the goal here, I think, is that Mystic Touch at 8% should be about equivalent for an average group as Chaos Brand at 3%, which is where it's at now. And I think it actually probably is going to be true, because if you're a monk there are a lot of times where you're a monk in a group and, like, you and the tank are the only physical damage. So increasing those two people by 8%, and then the rest is the same as increasing the rest of your group, by 3% in a lot of cases, which is what Chaos Brand would do. So yeah, I think this is going to be interesting, have some interesting implications for M+. On the raid side of things, I don't think this is going to be too relevant. Mystic Touch was already in a space where, like, you usually wanted to have access to it because you usually do have physical damage dealers. Hunter is now a raid buff that you'd play in almost all cases. You almost always have, I guess you could have tank warriors, but DPS warriors are very common. Rogues do some physical damage, although not much, depending on what spec they're playing. But all of that sort of lined up to make it true that it would be pretty rare for you to design a comp where Monk wouldn't be good. It would have to be one of those bosses where you want, like, 18 casters, right? And then your only physical damage is your tanks, and that just is a very rare niche thing that maybe comes up, like, in the Race to World First once every 5 years, probably once every 10 years now that Hunter has a raid buff. So pretty low impact on the raid side of things, I'd say. Monk was already a class you wanted, and you still want at least one monk. I guess it's now slightly, if you're in sort of a, less high-end situation and you don't have a monk, it's now become a slightly higher priority to get one. But I would still say it's probably not even, this is probably still worse than, Skyfear. It's probably still worse than Chaos Brand in raid, if I had to guess, or about the same. So it's not like this is the best raid buff or anything. But yeah, I think this shows that Blizzard, clearly understands that all classes in the game sort of need an equally balanced raid buff just to make things all fair and good. Speaking of which, let's talk about DK. Okay, still no raid buff here for DK, it looks like. So I guess that one's coming in a future update here. But yeah, we have some changes here for the Deathbringer 4-piece, which I actually don't remember what the old one did. But Exterminate deals 20% increased damage. Reaper's Mark can stack up to 15 additional times. Upon exploding, it increases your crit chance by 10% for 8 seconds. Then we've fixed some bugs. We have buffed the Frost version of the Manaforge Omega 2-set bonus to 20% from 10. And then the 4-piece is also getting buffed. Again, 100%. This is the same increase, right? Both of these are just doubling the damage of these 2 and 4-piece things. It's just templated differently. And then also it's now frost damage if it was triggered from an obliterate that consumed killing machines. So that'll be more synergistic with the kit as well. On Unholy's side of things, an issue, and so another bug's been fixed. And then Whitemane's Death Coil's damage has been doubled. Epidemic has been only increased by 50%, so a smaller increase than the other ones we've seen here. And the Undeath damage bonus from the 2 set has been doubled as well. So yeah, a lot of basically they're just buffing up the Rider set bonuses. In a lot of cases, they're taking parts of it and doubling them in this build here. Sand Lane is also getting some changes here. The 4 set now additionally increases the ability damage of Ghoul and Dancing Rune Weapon by 10%. Corrupted Blood ability of Blood Beast has been increased by 25%. Pact of the Sand Lane has now been buffed up to 15%, was 10%. So this Pact of the Sand Lane has gotten nerfed, and is now getting a little buffed back up. And then Frenzied Bloodthirst now increases the damage of Death Coil by 8% per stack, was 5%. Frost, just hero talent agnostic, is getting large buffs, 10% across the board, 30% to Obliterate. Rune Weapon now scales with Mastery, and it's now Shadow Frost, which has interactions on the Deathbringer hero talent trees. Consuming Killing Machine now causes Frost Scythe to deal 4 times instead of 3 times the normal damage. So that'll be quite nice in AoE with the way that Frost Scythe now functions in AoE. And fixed some bugs as well. Unholy, this is another kind of interesting long-term change here. Mastery now has an additional effect for Unholy. Increases the crit damage of your minions and diseases by 20%, and then that 20%, I guess, is going to scale with Mastery at some reduced coefficient, which they don't say what it is here. But this is interesting. So this means that crit strike is going to be a better stat for Unholy going forward than it was before, because you're just getting more crit damage. And then there's also interactions where the more crit you have, the more mastery you want, and vice versa as well. Unholy has traditionally, I believe, been a haste mastery spec, but this might move them towards being a haste and then some mastery, some crit, or even a mastery crit spec potentially. Although I imagine that the way the spec functions, haste is still something you desire. Although there have been some small changes to how Unholy functions, so that'll be something to look into for somebody who actually plays Unholy, which I don't really. Menacing Magus now causes Magus of the Dead Shadow Bolt to fire up to 8 nearby enemies. Oh yeah, last week there were patch notes as well, which I didn't make a video on, but they did a lot of target capping to Unholy stuff in there as well, and they reverted the Empower change to... They basically changed Breath of Syndragosa again. They took away the Empower stuff, and they also took away the Runic Power Drain from it. So some big changes, and other big changes were in those notes as well. I don't like making videos when I'm super late to the party. I like trying to be here in the first hour when these things come out, but if I'm later than a day or something, I usually won't make the video. So if you want, you can go find the patch notes from last week. I'm not going to make a video on those. Anyways, Epidemic going up by 30%, Death Coil 35%, although it's worth noting that Harbinger of Doom is getting nerfed, the amount that it's going to increase the damage of both of those abilities. Festering Wounds damage burst is going up, and then Commander of the Dead and Unholy Aura now also scale Legion of Souls as well. And we fixed an issue causing Desecrate to not function on the Dawnbreaker ships. Great. And then another bug as well. All right, Demon Hunter time. We have nerfs coming to the 2 sets for both Aldrachi and Felscard. 20% damage on Chaos Strike while Immo Aura is up, down from 30 for Felscard. And Reaver's Glaive damage is 50% instead of 60. Other physical damage, 25 instead of 30 for Aldrachi Reaver. Druid, they fixed a bug where Star Surges did infinite damage, so that was more than they wanted. And then Feral is getting a change to the Wildstalker 4-piece. Each stack is going to increase bursting growth damage taken by more, rather than 30%, it's now 40%. On to Evoker. Chrono Warden is getting the 4-piece buffed of their new set bonus. I say buffed, so I use the words buffed and nerfed when talking about these sorts of changes, but I do want to... There are some people I know that don't like those terms being used for content that's not out yet. I still think it's just the neatest way to say goes up or goes down is buffed and nerfed, but it's worth noting, like, if you're hearing, oh, this spec is getting buffed, but we're talking about a set bonus that's not out yet, you know, that doesn't really have a good handle of, like, if you're just trying to do this thought process that we would do when patch notes come out during a season of, like, oh, this spec is good and it's getting buffed, or this spec is bad and it's getting buffed, and, you know, that colors your opinions of something happening. I would say try not to let that happen on PTR, unless you've actually done the testing with these, or looked at the numbers of these different things of going. Basically, there's really not too much to learn about whether this is going to make Chrono Warden Evokers, whether Chrono Warden Evoker is going to be good or bad in the next season. If you see a patch note that their set bonus is getting its damage doubled, getting its damage cut in half, getting its damage multiplied by 10, that actually doesn't really tell you anything about whether it's going to be good or bad, because it could be getting its damage multiplied by 10, and then like, oh, okay, yeah, actually, now this is super OP, but also it could have been doing, 1% of the damage it's supposed to be doing, and now it's doing 10% of the damage it's supposed to be doing. That does happen with some abilities in WoW from time to time, where there's just huge increases or decreases to stuff, and it's still OP or still underpowered. So, yeah, I would basically, reading out patch notes like this, there's really not too much to learn from them, but I do it anyways because it's fun. Temporal Burst with Mana Forge Omega 4-piece now increased the number of Chrono Flames targets by 2, was 1. So this is the sort of change that actually changes the texture of how it plays a little bit, getting an extra target in there. And then fixed a bug. Flame Shaper, the 2-piece is getting nerfed here. Inner Flame increases periodic healing and damage by 25% instead of 40. Inner Flame now plays a fiery visual on the Evoker while it's active. Nice. And fixed some bugs, and Essence Bomb now triggers twice if the Evoker has 2 stacks of Inner Flame. And then Scale Commander, we fixed an issue where the 4-piece would not dynamically update when applied or removed. Hunter, fixed an issue with Huntmaster's Call, and then Hati and Fenrir, base damage increased to about double a normal Dire Beast's damage. So, okay, that's, I guess, a buff there. Mage, Frostfire. The 2-piece now increases Meteor, Comet Storm, and Frostfire Burst damage by 30%. Frostfire Bolt damage unchanged. I believe this set bonus is already really, really good as well, so, but I could be thinking of a different one. Arcane Spellslinger here, the 2 set. Arcane Blast additionally grants 2 stacks of Arcane Harmony. And then Frost, the 2 set. Icelance now additionally has a 100% chance to grant 1 stack of Cold Front. Cold Front Splinter proc chance reduced to 20%. Sun Fury, the Mana Forge Omega 2 set bonus, is Spellfire Sphere damage bonus is going to be increased by 1% instead of 2%. Okay, so they're nerfing the Sun Fury 2 set here. Then there's that monk change we already talked about. Paladin, we have a Lightsmith change here that is being nerfed to 75% effectiveness casts of Hammer and Anvil. And then we also have a change to 4-piece here where if a stack of Masterwork is gained while at maximum stacks, a lesser armament will be cast on nearby ally. I thought I already did that, but maybe I'm thinking of a different one. And then the 4-set lesser weapon is going to prioritize healers when possible for Holy, which I know Holy Paladins aren't going to like that. Given other healers more healing, especially if that is attributed to them in the logs, which I don't know if it is or not. They're not going to like that at all. Shaman, Stormbringer. They're nerfing the 2 set for both Ellie and Enhance, although it functions slightly differently for the 2. So you have to get 50% more stacks of Awakening Storms if you're Elemental before you proc it. And if you're an Enhance, it now procs for 6 seconds instead of 8. I will say, power level aside, I think that like 6 seconds is about the least of a major cooldown that feels at all good to get. Even going from 8 to 6, I'm not usually a fan of, because just like I'd rather have a little bit more time in my cooldown, because with such a small amount of time, you can't really like play around it as much. When it procs, now it does depend on the cooldown here. Ascendance, maybe not one that you have to do too much extra thought process with, but I would say in general, I prefer getting at least 8 seconds and maybe 10 seconds even of a cooldown when it procs, and then just having it proc less often. That would be my preference if I was playing one of these specs, usually. Warrior, Colossus, the 4 set, is being nerfed here to only increase the crit chance of your next 1 instead of 2. Mountain Thane, the 2 set, see here's an example, Ionizing Strike damage increased by 725%. The 4 set increases the damage by Ionizing Strike by 100%, was 50%. So yeah, huge increases on the number there. And then Slayer, execute damage is being nerfed here on the 2 set from 20% to 10. Then for Prot Warrior, we have a change to Spellbreaker, which was the controversial replacement for Spell Block. It now has an 8% chance to affect a magic damage event, but reduces damage taken by 50%. So it's going to proc more often. It was a 4% chance to completely negate magic damage. This is way better. It will be better the more they increase this number, and if it means reducing this number, that's always going to be a good deal. And it's going to, if they could increase this number to 100% and then make this number like 5 or 10%, I think Prot Warriors would be a lot happier than they are with this. But of course, this is a lot better than 4% chance to reduce damage taken by 100%. Although it is worth noting that some meme potential goes away when you don't have like with the 100% damage taken reduction, you could, try and soak something that is just a one-shot, right? And then just 4% of the time, it works every time. That doesn't quite work anymore. So if there's an ability that does, 400 million shadow damage or whatever in the new raid, you can't have a meme strat that just works 1 out of every 20 pulls anymore, 1 out of every 25 pulls. So yeah, that is a casualty. The one cool thing about Spellbreaker is now gone, but it is generally better, but it still sucks. And when I say sucks here, again, not a power level concern, just this style of effect is still not the sort of defense that tanks will enjoy having. Okay, dungeons. The vote to abandon feature is now available for testing. Players can now vote to abandon a key after a key is socketed. Players who leave runs before completion, timer end, or a successful vote to abandon will eventually be marked as a Keystone Deserter in the pre-made Dungeon Finder. Hopefully, one thing that is missing here that hopefully is present in the actual implementation is before completion, timer end, a successful vote, or somebody else leaving. Because if you have to stay in after one person leaves, I guess you could always vote to abandon with the other 4 people at that point. But what if there's some people? What if there's 2 people then that don't vote to abandon or something, and the other? So hopefully that's something that also is true about how this functions. I don't want to speculate too much about how this works because I'm sure there'll just be a post that details more things, if not from Blizzard, from data miners and from testers, now that this is available for testing. And marked players can complete M+ runs without leaving, even untimed, to bring themselves back into good standing and remove their deserter's mark. I think that's good. I think, again, we talked a lot about this system when it was first announced, so you can go see my first video about 11.2, which, by the way, I do have a playlist of 11.2 videos, so if you missed anything except for the stuff that I missed, you can go find that in those videos. And then finally, we have some PvP changes. I don't usually go over this, but it is sort of interesting here. You can now get your cloak strands from PvP matches. I think that's a really good change. And then also they nerfed everything by 50% in PvP that basically from the raid, it looks like, except for Perfidious Projector is 75% instead of 50%. So maybe this item is going to be, maybe this is an early indication that this item is going to be good, or maybe it's just going to be especially good in PvP. Who's to say? Anyways, that's it for this video. Hope you've enjoyed. Let me know what your thoughts are on the monk change in particular, but any of these other changes as well. And thanks for watching. See you in the next one. Give Death Knights a raid buff. Bye.